How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, giving you guys your July 2019 horoscope for Scorpio, Sun, and Rising. Thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys, and I'm sending you all of my positive energy that I have for you guys this month because we've been talking about this for a little while. July is like the most intense month of this year. However, the one thing that I wanted to say is with all of the changes and with all of the things that are kind of transpiring during this month, what's important that is during this time, this is a really important time to really put down seeds of growth, of change. Things are going to kind of like be a little bit different, but what's important about this change is that in August and September, the next 2 months, things are going to get really, really good. And so it's important right now to go through this change in this process and to plant the seeds you need because we're going into better times, but we got to get through this. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we've got going on in July is I keep saying Mars first. On July 1st, we have Mars ingressing into Leo. And this is important for you guys because you guys are ruled by Mars for one. However, Mars has been in Cancer and its sign of fall in your ninth house. And this has been kind of causing maybe some irritations, maybe some questions and some insecurities around, far distance travel, religion, spirituality, all of that ninth house fun stuff. However, Mars, the planet of our actions and our intentions and what we're kind of doing and where our energy is going into your 10th house. And the 10th house, of course, is all about your career, your public vocation. It has to do with your boss, it has to deal with bigger life stuff. A good way I like to look at it is the 10th house is kind of like the top of the sky where everyone can kind of see what's going on. It's like what you're known for almost in a sense. And as Mars, the malefic, he's also all about severing and cutting, and Scorpio's case, stinging. It's hot, it severs, it inflammates. It's going into the sign of Leo, which is all about, at times, our ego and our pride, but also about being integrity and also being authentic and standing up for being its leader of self, almost in a sense. And so as Mars enters your 10th house, you may be seeing some struggling issues with maybe your boss or things going on in your employment. However, with Mars being in Leo in the 10th house, I think this is about taking greater action and bigger strides towards what you're wanting to build within the context of your career or just bigger life stuff, what you want to maybe change, what you want to be more authentic with, and what you want to take action on that kind of feels more joy with you. But most of the time, this is going to be looking like stuff going on in your 10th house. But then the next day, on July 2nd, that's when we have the solar eclipse in Cancer happening. And this is pretty important because now we're starting eclipse season, which is always the weirdest 2 weeks ever. And there's always something going on. Eclipses are basically like, there's an emphasis on the energy and the houses that are going on with it. So definitely pay attention on July 2nd. This is a solar eclipse, so we are talking about technically a new moon, but the moon's going to go over the sun, so there's this blocking out of light. There's this innate need to fulfill this area and to fulfill this role. That's the North Node being in play, and this is all happening in your 9th house, of course, of spirituality, beliefs, religion, philosophy, far distance travel, foreign languages, kingsmanship, and all of that stuff. It also has to do with publishing, too. However, with the 9th house being so activated, the solar eclipse is kind of like drawing attention and kind of laying down of like, hey, this is what you need to focus on right now, and this is what needs to be taken care of right now. But then the next day, on July 3rd, we have Venus moving into Cancer, which is definitely changing things up a little bit. Venus is now getting out of your 8th house, and it's going into the 9th. Venus, the planet of love and value and connection. She wants you to indulge and have fun in things. Going into the sign of Cancer, which is all about our emotions. How can we trust? How can we relate? How can we build connection? What are the essentials in life? What is sentimental? What means something? And what do we need to protect? And what do we need to nurture? And as Venus goes into Cancer, she's finding value in all this stuff and is wanting to explore this area more. And this is in your 9th house of belief, of spirituality, of, higher thought and stuff like that. So as Venus is transiting this area, this is going to be a time to really look at your beliefs and really look at where you're going or maybe where you want to expand yourself and kind of go, what needs to be taken care of here and what am I really valuing now that I'm finding myself more and more into this area and more into this side of myself. But then on July 8th, we have Mercury stationing retrograde, and this Mercury retrograde is pretty there's a lot going on with it. I did a whole Mercury retrograde video, so make sure you check it out. However, Mercury stations retrograde at the early degrees of Leo, and it's going to be conjoining Mars basically at the time it goes retrograde. And so with Mercury retrogrades, yeah, this has to do with miscommunications. This is going to deal with some errors. You're going to be going back over stuff that, for the past couple weeks have been happening. But the one thing I wanted to hit on is while this is happening in your 10th house of career, this may be a miscommunication at work. And with Mars conjoining it, there's a lot of spice and flair here, which things can get kind of loud pretty fast. So my biggest advice is pay attention to what miscommunications can happen in that public sphere, in your work area, in your career, and be wary about what exactly needs to be said and what exactly needs to be communicated and when. And then about a week later on July 16th, that is when we have the lunar eclipse in Capricorn. And this is, again, we're done. After this, we'll be out of eclipse season. It's going to be a weird 2 weeks in between. Then there's going to be a lot to think about and go on. However, this lunar eclipse is happening in your 3rd house. And the one thing I wanted to hit on is while Venus and the sun and these eclipses are happening in your 9th house of expanding yourself, of what do you believe, getting more connected to your beliefs, learning something more, educating yourself in some way. The 3rd house is what we already know and what we're good at, what our capabilities are. And it also has to do with our siblings and our neighbors and communication. However, this lunar eclipse that's happening in your 3rd house is kind of what needs to be strayed away from with what you already know in order to educate you on something higher. We have Saturn in the South Node and Pluto going through your 3rd house. So there's been a lot that it's kind of you've had to relearn stuff and figure out what your best capabilities are and where you want to commit yourself to and what responsibilities you can handle. That lunar eclipse that's happening is kind of this, you can understand where certain ideologies, certain ways that you apply yourself don't necessarily work anymore, and it's time to restructure that in order for you to grow into a higher space. And I think that's going to be a really important realization for you guys on July 16th. But what I also wanted to hit on is on the same day, Venus will be opposing Saturn. Now, while Venus is in Cancer being dude, I'm starting to value more of this growth and, maybe that has to do with far distance travel, maybe it has to learn, deal with higher education, or maybe you're more into your more spiritual, religious sense. Venus is really valuing this and she's wanting to protect and nurture this and she's loving it. But as it's opposing Saturn, maybe the structure and the framework of which you have been doing things and that the way that you do things isn't in alignment with the stuff that you're starting to value. And so this is going to be a time of realizing yeah, even though you want this, it's not going to happen because this needs to get addressed first. But I say that because even though that's kind of a negative thing, the next day, Venus is going to conjoin the North Node, where the North Node is, Rahu. It's like the dragon's head. It's what we're hungry for. It's what we're wanting to manifest in a sense. Venus conjoining the North Node is very much yeah, you may realize what structures need to change and how you need to implement that, but then you get to more of the understanding, more of the awareness, and more of the passion for yes, I'm wanting to go in this direction. This is what I need to do to take care of myself, and I'm valuing this, so I'm going to be going in this area. So it's not all of a sudden you can just start doing stuff. It's more of you're going to start feeling that more. Then it's going to hit a point where you're okay, I'm going to do this now. Then on July 19th, that is when we have Mercury retrogressing back into Cancer. So as Mercury retrogrades in your 10th house and you're still figuring out bigger life stuff and career stuff and whatever, Mercury will go back into the 9th house where this is back Mercury in Cancer. This is about kind of rethinking and looking at how we feel about situations and what logic we're putting on our feelings. And this is going into your 9th house, which comes back down to, well, what do you believe about the situation? What are your thoughts on this? And how do you feel? And how are you going to act upon that? But then 2 days later, on July 21st, that is when Mercury goes Cazimi with the sun. It will conjoin it at 28 degrees Cancer. This is when Mercury is going right in between the sun and the earth. And this, in a sense, is when Mercury kind of gets purified by fire. And there's a lot of clear thought process and clear logic when it comes to what Mercury retrograde's been doing. So once we get to July 21st, this is going to be a time of kind of going okay, I'm starting to see more about what I feel logically, so I can start making better decisions in more of alignment with what my beliefs are. Then on July 23rd, we got the sun going into Leo. Leo season begins. That is when the sun's transiting your 10th house. The main light and the source of illumination and warmth and most of life here on Earth is going to be transiting your 10th house of career, public vocation, what you're known for, bigger life stuff, could even be hitting your midheaven. So expect Leo season to bring a lot of light into most of the stuff that you've got going on. But then on July 24th, that is when we have Mercury conjoining Venus. And I think this is really important as, you know, Mercury's retrograding still in Cancer. It's still trying to understand what it thinks and what it feels about it all. Venus being in Cancer where, you know, Venus is like, I'm starting to really value this. I'm wanting to nurture myself more by expanding myself and learning new things and going new places and doing something out of my comfort zone. Mercury conjoining Venus is kind of like Mercury speaking out that, like, it's kind of like having a talk with Venus, and Mercury all of a sudden changed its mind, and Mercury's now spitting out that message of Venus of like, maybe this is what I do value, maybe this is the area I want to go in, and I'm starting to logically apply that to, it's kind of like you may feel it, but now it's time to logically and in a more reasonable manner start to make sense of it all. But then on July 28th, that is when Venus enters Leo and goes into your 10th house, and this is bringing, you know, Mars can be stirring up problems there, Mercury was stirring up problems there, but now that Venus is transiting there, Venus is bringing value, she's bringing expression, she's bringing more of a light to your whole career area, she's wanting you to be admired and wanting you to get the light and be expressive of it and feel it and, you know, utilize it to your advantage, or just utilize it because that doesn't make sense, I guess. But anyway, Venus going through 10,000 Leo is going to be bueno, and we'll talk more about that next. But then we end the month off on July 31st with the new moon in Leo. So now we have Mars, the Sun, Venus, and now the moon. And this new moon there's a lot going on because next month Venus goes Cazimi with the Sun. That's a really big deal. Mars doesn't do it until Virgo season. But on the other hand, there's a lot of refreshing type energy going on with Leo at this moment. When, of course, Mercury goes back into it, it's all going to be trining Jupiter for the most part. There's a lot of benefits going on in this career area that are going to definitely help you out monetarily, since it's all trining Jupiter in a sense. But I think it really comes back down to what I talk about in my Mercury retrograde video of being that light and, you know, reimagining yourself for something higher. And that's what I got for you guys. So thank you guys so much for being here again and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'll be seeing you next month.